Amit Sinha shot this image on a photo walk that I'd organized on the 19th of April 2013. It was about long exposure photography. Now, this is put straight out of camera, and Amit's been good enough to provide me with a raw file. I'm going to demonstrate how I'd go about editing this image to go from straight out of camera to a final image. So, I'm going to start off with the image over here in Bridge and hit Enter to open it up in Adobe Camera Raw. Now, there are a couple of things to notice straight away. The image itself is, well, it has some perspective correction, but the other part is that it's not horizontal. And this one's particularly difficult to pick out as to where the exact horizontal is. So I'm actually going to have to pick out a vertical, and a vertical that's as close to the center of the image as possible, because given the fact that he was using the lens at a wide aspect, the sides of the image are going to fall in. So I'm actually going to look for the vertical somewhere around over here, but I'll start off with applying a couple of lens corrections. So I'm going to go to Profile, enable the lens corrections, and there we are. It's picked up the camera and the lens type, and I'm going to go ahead and remove any chromatic aberrations. And after that, I'm going to use the ruler tool or the align tool, and I'm going to click and drag against the line that I feel represents the vertical. So that, which ought to align that. Now at this stage, this image looks like it is generally horizontal. So we're going to start applying a range of different adjustments. Starting off from the basic adjustments, I'm going to have to select a white balance that works. And I'm going to need to make an artistic choice over here, and after going through all of these, I'm going to actually select Flash over here because it seems to work best. Now, starting from the basic settings, I'm going to take a look at the highlights and see how far I can pull them back, because you'll see that all the neon signs are blown out. So the moment I pull that back, and I've pulled it back all the way, the highlights have gone and balanced these signs out. As a result of that, it's kind of underexposed the image. So what I might do is just crank up the image probably to 0.67. So we're going to use 0.67 over there. Now let's see if we can do anything with the shadows. If I pull the shadows back, it's not doing a whole lot, but if I do crank it up, it washes the image out. What I might do is just pull the shadows back by -10, and then I'm going to do some white point and black point correction. So holding down the Alt key, let's pull the white point slider back, and I'm going to go as far as to when I see these last two dots. So that's about -60. So that's a white point correction, and similarly we'll do a black point correction, holding down the Alt key, click and drag the black slider until we start seeing black. So over here I'm going to leave it at about there. So that's about -20. Next up, we need to sort out vibrance and saturation. I'm not going to mess around too much. I'm just going to give them some default values of 10 and 10. I'm not going to mess with clarity at this point in time. I could. If I used clarity, it would add a lot of detail, but I don't want to do that just now. So I'm going to leave that as it is. Then, moving on, going to the Details tab, I'm going to go ahead and crank up the details to 100. Now this is going to make the edges nice and sharp, and it's going to make the image just look a lot more crisp. Next up, we're going to use a graduated filter. So using that button over there, I'm going to place my cursor over here, hold on the Shift key, and just pull downwards to about there. Now we've got a nice blue sky, and having been shot in the blue hour, I'm just going to increase the amount of blue over there. Straight away, I'm just going to set these to defaults. So see what I can do with exposure. Probably crank it down to -50, which is about there. And let's see what we do with highlights over here. If I crank it all the way back, doesn't really upset the balance of color. I don't want to push it up, so I'm going to crank it all the way back. Let's see what happens if I mess with the shadows. It probably makes it look a wee bit too dark. I'm going to leave it at -50, just not to overwhelm it. If I cranked up the clarity, it gives a lot more definition to the upper structures. I might leave the clarity at +60. And let's see what happens when I crank up the saturation. It gives it an intense blue, probably a wee bit too blue. Let's see if we go to 50. Let's leave it at 60. So that point in time, I'm pretty happy with that graduated filter. I'm going to apply my second graduated filter. Hit the new radio button, hold down shift, click and drag, and this time I'm dragging upwards right till about there. Now I don't want to apply a blue filter down there, I probably just want to leave it as is. The exposure I've set to -50, which is about right. Pulling back on the highlights, let's see if we want to do anything with the shadows. We probably actually want to make this look a little brighter, so I'm going to crank the shadows up to +10. The clarity over here is something that I might want to crank up, because what I might want to do is just bring some more definition onto these flagstones. And do we really need more saturation on that? Well, if we pulled it back, it looks kind of dull, and if we crank it all the way, it looks very yellow. So we might set the saturation to, we might leave it at 60. So at this stage, this is what our image looks like, which is quite different from where we started from. Let's go ahead and open the image. Now the first thing I'm going to do is apply a bit of perspective correction. So do this, Control A in Photoshop, go Edit, Transform, Perspective, click and drag on the anchors till about there. It's not overdone, just a touch. And with all perspective correction, it squashes the image a bit. So once again, from there, go Edit, Scale, and we're just going to pull it up just a touch, just to balance that out. So at this point in time, we've got the dimensions more or less right, and this image is very passable, but we're going to make a few more changes. So I'm going to use Content Aware Fill over here, and I'm going to get rid of this piece of garbage that's lying around on the pavement. It's a bit of a distraction, so let's just take the Content Aware tool and paint over it. There it goes. And just get rid of a couple of these little eye magnets out there. So there we are, we've cleaned up Bourke Street a little bit. Next job, I'm going to go ahead and launch Nik Color Effects. It's Filter, Nik Collection, Nik Color Effects Pro, and the first filter that I'm going to apply is the Pro Contrast tool. You'll see that the moment I apply this and give it about 50, if I go 100 it's a bit too much. Let's go to about 60. It's already made it look far more vibrant from before. There, it's made the colors a lot more richer. So I'm going to apply that. I'm going to use a reflector, a gold reflector, and I'm just going to bring the light intensity down to about 10%, just to not overdo it, but it's just made the scene look a lot more warm. I'm also going to use a skylight filter, and that just softens the scene a little bit, and I'm going to leave it at its default 20%. And then I'm also going to consider using some cross-processing. So the cross-processing filter, let's see what works best. We've got a range of different items to work from, and we probably don't want to go with something overwhelming. And this is the tricky bit. It's picking something that's not going to overdo this. I thought I saw that the CO4 was not bad, so that's currently set at 33%. What I might do is just pull it back to about 5%. So it's just balancing it out slightly. And then finally I'm going to apply a little bit of vignetting. Actually, I'm not going to apply the vignetting at this stage because I just realized that I'm going to have to crop this image. So I'm just going to use this set of filters, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and Nik Color Effects is going to go ahead and create another layer on top of this. So here we are with our new Nik Color Effects layer. What I'm going to do now is going to go Layer, Flatten Image. I'm going to go Filter, Launch Imagenomics Noiseware, and let's see what would be a good noise filter on this. We've got it set to Night Scene. See what happens with Landscape. Still a little bit of noise in there. We might go with the night scene because that seems to work fairly well without being overly aggressive. So now that we've cleaned up the noise, it's a matter of cropping the image. Just use the crop tool, pull that back just a little bit, keep the flag there, and over here we're just going to roll this up just to underneath where that person's foot is, and crop over there. And at that stage we've got a fairly good composition, hit filter, and color effects, and we're just going to apply a little bit of vignetting. Not much, just going to use a little bit of vignetting. About 10% ought to be plenty. Once done, hit OK, and voila, there we are. Going to go layer, flatten the image, file, save as, and we're just going to keep it as the final image. So there we have it. A complete workflow to go from start to finish.